Hey everyone, I'm Leo,
I'm Frank.
and welcome to a very, very special episode of
Terror Recollect. Hey guys, thanks for joining us once again. Normally, this would be the time where we would introduce you to season 2 of episode whatever. But we're going to be starting from here on out. We're going to be starting to do things a little bit differently. We're going to ditch the whole season gimmick and just strictly do numbered episodes only. And Leo, why are we doing this?
when we did the first season, I wasn't really sure where we were going to go with it, and I, at the very least, wanted it to end on a very comfortable 10 episodes. But I've really grown to really enjoy this entire process, and it's something that we want to continue to bring you and not have to worry about keeping track further on down the line. What episode is this? It's season 4, episode 37. It's just, no, at this point, we are on numbers. So this is actually what, episode 17, because we had 10 episodes in season 1, and this would have been the 7th episode in the second season, which makes us episode 17. It's actually been these episodes via Zoom that have really laid down for me the fact of how much I enjoy doing this.
Yeah.
And there's no pressure, there's no stress. It's a very enjoyable process. We get to express our love for cinema and for horror specifically. I mean, it's a small thing, maybe, for some people. I'm actually excited to be like, yeah, episode 17.
Well, without further ado, episode 17 is a very special episode also because of the topic that we chose to discuss. And what is that topic, Leo?
Today is the Mount Rushmore of horror villains.
Are in no particular order: Chucky, Jason, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, and Leatherface.
Yep. I always reflect on my time as a young person, as a child, because the world imprints itself on you in those times, and you end up having a great affinity because of those particular moments. It was a thing where you probably shouldn't have been discussing it with your friends because you're too young to watch horror movies, so why are you discussing it? But yeah. I remember that whole catch up with you talking with your friends and saying, oh, how many Chucky movies are there? How many Jason movies? Yeah, I doubt a lot of people call them Friday the 13th movies. How many Jason movies? How many Michael Myers movies? How come they call Michael Myers? How come they don't call him by just Michael? But yet they call Freddy and Jason and Chucky and Leatherface. What's his real name? Like all these little schoolyard conversations that you don't want your teacher to hear because she's going to reprimand you for watching horror movies at 11 years old, 12 years old or whatever, or even younger. Mm-hmm. And that's why I particularly wanted to do this topic, because that's a flashback and a touchstone to those times and a callback. To me, the idea would be fun to try to revisit it as adults with this format of this show. So, Frank, if you could pick one, it doesn't have to be in particular order. What's your first one that you would pick to discuss?
Well, I also want to say real quick, I totally understand your point of view about how, those schoolyard conversations, it was kind of like the forbidden thing, and that kind of made you want to, talk about them and watch them more. Exactly. Yeah. The thing you're not supposed to have.
That's what I'm supposed to. Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Since I'm not supposed to.
Yeah.
I remember having those conversations at the lunch tables in junior high, because I didn't catch up to them until junior high, not elementary school, but junior high. Being in those lunch tables, and you climb in, and you're eating your pizza and your chocolate milk or whatever, your cafeteria food.
Yeah.
And you look around. Hey, did you guys watch that Jason movie? You guys watch that Freddy movie? Hey, who do you like better, Freddy or Jay? Who can kick whose butt? But yeah, that thing you're not supposed to talk about. It's so fun to talk about it. Well, back then and now.
it's always fun to hear other people's point of views, and that's exactly what we do on this show, like, but sorry, the question was, if I had to choose one to discuss,
Who would you?
let's start off with Michael Myers. How about
I
that?
knew you were going to pick it. There was no way you were going to pick Freddy first.
First of all, Michael Myers, it has his look. I mean, aside from the mask, it's pretty consistent throughout the franchise. It's just the coveralls and the white mask. I always like that ghostly, image. It really terrified me. And he's really the only one out of these top 5 or any horror icons that really terrified me as a kid. So, and then his weapon of choice, which is like the butcher knife. Also, even though he kills in various ways throughout the series, it's very simple but very, very effective.
I agree with your description on the visuals of Michael and how that alone is so, I mean, the word that comes to mind is visually arresting. Like, it's not just beautiful. It's not just frightening. It's visually arresting. You can't ignore it.
Yeah.
The very basic outfit, it's just a jumpsuit.
Yeah.
It's almost perfect in its simplicity because you don't necessarily see people walking around in that outfit.
Yeah.
You don't, unless you work at a car repair place or whatever. That's not something that is every day. I mean, or you might be at like a workplace or like whatever, but it's not a pair of jeans and a shirt, and the mask itself is so simple because it's human features. It's a forehead, it's holes where eyes used to be, and it's the curves of a face. But in filmmaking, it's about light and shadow. So when you have a plain white face and you have good filmmakers, you're going to have wonderful play of light and shadow.
And the first movie is a great example of that.
Absolutely. Dean Cundey, an amazing cinematographer, of course, under the direction of John Carpenter. And the iconic butcher knife, it's like, to me, you can put a jack-o'-lantern, a butcher knife, someone in a jumpsuit, and that mask, and you don't need to know anything else. You could sell 10 more movies just with that image. And you can't help but ooh and ah all day over it and just, oh my God, that's so cool.
Really, when you cut it down to the basics, the scariest parts is the unknown.
From a visual standpoint or a filmmaking standpoint, you could make a movie about, let's just say, we'll put in this bucket, things that you would be scared of. So that has a limit to it because a bucket has a certain shape and size. But fear of the unknown is vast. It can be anything. And that's the thing about the Halloween films, is they're set in suburbia.
Yeah.
They're set in people's homes where you thought was safe is not safe. What is behind the mask? What is the reason for? So the unknown, like if you were to hear like someone knocking at your door, you don't know the intention behind that.
Right.
It would be like, hey, Frank, it's Leo. I'm here with the pizza. Oh, okay, cool. Come on in. But if it's just, your mind starts to spin. Okay, who would that be? No one's supposed to be here. I'm here by myself. It's late at night. And then our minds are amazing, and it can make believe all these horrible things if given all the right clues and cues. And that's what Halloween does probably better than most. And it's like you said, it's perfect in its simplicity.
I think that's a good way to sum up Michael Myers' fear of the unknown. Fear. So that's a good time to transition to our next big bad guy.
Let me talk about Jason now, because it's actually going to be brief. It's actually going to be brief.
Okay.
I think I did a 3 or 4 episode stretch. I presented in detail in season 1 that what my overall thoughts were on the series. And in last week's episode, we talked about the beauty of the Mrs. Voorhees origin. I'd never really talked about it in detail until that episode.
I completely agree with you on the whole Mrs. Voorhees thing, because it wasn't, the original one. I'm a Jason guy. When I think of Friday the 13th, I'm one of those guys. Um, it wasn't until we actually did that episode where, as I'm discussing it, I kind of had a new respect, as we were talking about it, just like you.
What would be our third head in no particular order?
Yeah, let's go to Chucky. Let's go with Chucky. Let's go with Chucky.
Chucky.
I'll be completely honest. If we were to do these in order, Chucky would be my number 5.
Oh, he'd be my number 5 too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, not point out the obvious, but he's a freaking doll, and he's about 2 foot high. And as far as like the character is Brad Dourif, it doesn't get too much more legendary than that. You know what I mean? And he was able to bring this character to life with his voice, alone. And people like Jason and Freddy, it's all about movements, and selling that character based on, the way you handle your movements and things like that. Well, first of all, his voice is very creepy to begin with. He has one of the most iconic laughs out of all of them. Really, and one thing I like about Chucky is that other than Michael being, a little kid, and he was kind of like had that innocence that he kind of, they kind of flipped it. Chucky his soul, or Charles Lee Ray's soul, inhabits this doll, and it's supposed to represent innocence and playfulness, and ends up being a total like opposition of that, and
that is a great observation. Yeah, it's the twist on innocence. Oh wow, I hadn't really thought of that. Good observation.
And like I said, other than Michael Myers, who started off as a kid, you know what I mean, but that's kind of a twist on innocence as well, but not as much.
They don't dwell on it.
Right,
Versus
yeah.
Child's Play is almost like that's what it's all based on.
So who would you pick as the number 4, the next face on the Mount Rushmore?
I would probably say Leatherface. If we're going from Chucky, let's go to Leatherface. I love the first movie. It's my favorite slasher of all time. There are how many entries? There's Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, which was done 10 years later by Tobe Hooper, also the director of the first. One of my favorites, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
Mine too.
Technology doesn't really fit. Storyline doesn't really make sense when you compare it to the other ones, but it's a fun movie.
It is. And then Next Generation.
Next Generation. Also, after that, you have the reboot of 2003. You have a prequel to the reboot of 2003. And then they had a movie that took it back to the events of the first movie and ignored everything else. And then you have the prequel to that movie, which wasn't really, it had its moments, but it wasn't that good. So that's
called Leatherface, right?
Yeah, called Leatherface. What are your thoughts on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Leatherface?
Well, first let me say this. They did those reboots, the Jessica Biel one, which was, I think, 2003.
2003.
That's one of the remakes that got it right, in my opinion. That's one of the best horror remakes ever made.
And it kind of reinvents the style, and they kind of went to that kind of grimy horror style, which was replicated in a lot of movies, at least the production design of it.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. And once I got over the fact, okay, it's not any of the previous Leatherfaces, this is a brand new, awesome Leatherface, I'm like, okay, I'm with it. This is a fantastic movie. I love it.
The one thing that separates Leatherface with all those others is that it's not just Leatherface that these characters, these final girls or whatever, have to worry about. He's got the family. Yeah. He's got these other accomplices, as if you want to put it like that. And it's like in each movie too. Each movie has like him, and it's not just him, but it's the family. You know what I mean? So that's what kind of separates him from the rest of the pack. In a way, he kind of has help, but he is the main one, obviously.
Well, he's also mute. He doesn't talk. No version of him is talked.
Right.
So you have to have a cast of characters around him that will tell the story. In the original, you had the hitchhiker and you had the cook, who were amazing at showing you how twisted that family was. And Leatherface was almost he didn't have to say anything because they both spoke so loudly, so clearly.
Yeah.
The dilapidated state of the house spoke so clearly. The decor of heads and rooms with body parts. I mean, the visuals spoke so Leatherface didn't have to.
That's
The second movie
perfect.
wasn't. I've tried to like the second movie, but I just don't.
Yeah. I've got to the point where it's like one of those things where can you find the strength to at least enjoy it for that, at least for being so crazy and a different direction.
I had seen part 2 actually before I'd seen part 1, and I didn't like it. And I was like, this is terrible. Because I actually bought it at a swap meet when my mom wasn't looking. Bought Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. This is not the one I bought. I rebought a brand new sealed one. But
I was about to say.
No, this is a brand new one I bought on eBay. Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 I bought at a swap meet. And I bought Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 at the swap meet. Watched them both, tripped out on both, didn't like it. And then a friend showed me Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't want to use the word scared. I was taken aback. Leatherface, we haven't really talked too much about. So it's kind of interesting to get into it and see just overall kind of what a mess the franchise is. I don't even call it a franchise. I can call it a mess.
Yeah.
That it is.
I did want to ask you being such a big fan, I wanted to ask you, like, as far as like these guys' weapons of choice, the butcher knife, the machete, the chainsaw has got to be one of the most
ferocious
weapons.
Is the word I'd use.
Yeah, there you go.
Because the butcher knife, it's an
powerful as the person holding it.
Killer. The machete is kind of brutal. The finger glove is kind of sinister because there's the thought behind it. Chucky's kind of weapon of choice is whatever's around. He's kind of a opportunist. But the chainsaw, I mean, Leatherface does not talk. So there are long scenes, at least in the original, where he's chasing Sally, and all you hear is the rumble of the chainsaw and her screaming. And it's so unnerving.
Yeah.
But as a horror fan, it's also exciting to watch. He's just like, oh my God. So it's I won't go so far as to say it's its own character, but the chainsaw has its own personality, has its own voice. It moves, and it's a threat all by itself.
Well, let's get right into our last guy here, which is Freddy Krueger. Wes Craven, Robert Englund. Krueger. What is it about Freddy Krueger that you love particularly?
His charisma.
Yeah.
Honestly. He's doing horrible things, but you can't hate him.
Yeah.
I think, my favorite entry is the third Nightmare on Elm Street film, Dream Warriors. And he's so good. And we've discussed Nightmare on Elm Street 3 in depth. We've discussed the potential of a Freddy versus Chucky. We discussed Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5 from when we went to the screening. We discussed Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1 to some degree when we went to that screening. So we've said quite a few things about Freddy, but I mean, he's got a lot of entries. But what I love about him has to boil down to the fact that everything that he's doing with such showmanship, with such theater, with such, the fact that, when he peels away his sweater to show the faces, when he taunts people, it's a game. He could very easily just kind of do a real quick kill, but it's like, no, I'm going to make this do this. I'm going to make this. Even in part 2, when he's standing in front of the, I guess he knocks something over and he creates a flame behind him. He goes, "You are all my children now." It's like, it's very dramatic. It's very theatrical. He doesn't hide behind what he's doing. In the first one, he kind of hid a little bit. But even when he showed up, he would even be like, "Hey, Nancy, look." Yeah. Like he was a showman.
Yeah.
Let me demonstrate. Let me perform for you.
Yeah.
I think those are the things that, especially being portrayed by Robert Englund, who understands the character, who's given it his own twist. That's what makes me love. And then on top of the fact, dreams, the concept of dreams, the non-world reality of dreams, and being able to exist in a world of dreams is fascinating. So you put all those elements together, it's a recipe for success.
I grew up when I was little. I think one of the first ones that it's one of those memories that I have of you know, my uncle giving me, you know, some movies to watch, and and Freddy's Dead was one of those. And I just remember taking it home super excited to see the new Freddy movie. And I just love that one. And that was one of the ones, that in part 4 were one of the ones where he really like screws with people, like in a very like goofy, you know, silly kind of way.
And that's the stuff I'm not too huge a fan of, is the goofy stuff.
Having it take place in your dreams or nightmares, it gives him kind of free range to do the most, you know, wackiest things, you know, which we saw in part 4 and part 6. That's why I don't mind the silliness of it, because it's a dream, but it's like a fantasy. It's your dream, but it's his fantasy. You know what I mean? Like, you know, even I know you don't like the part in part 6 where he's doing the video game thing, but that was kind of like, that was the guy's thing, was he played video games.
Yeah.
So
well, I'll tell you, when I rewatched it, it made total sense in the context of that story and in the tone that they had laid out from the very beginning. I revisited all of them. I rewatched all of them, and I don't think there's a bad one among them. I think that they're all great, but I definitely have an order of which ones I think are better. Yeah. So any last thoughts as we close out on Freddy, who we last discussed, or just in general on this topic?
These are franchises I can never see ending. They always say, you know, evil never dies type thing. And I think these are 5 of the franchises that I think will never, even if it takes them a while to make another one out, they'll still make it.
I agree completely. And my last observation is a little bit of a piggyback on top of that. Each one has their own mythology to them. Each one has their own world and reasons. And even though the sequels have either diluted or have over-explained certain things, these characters, I believe, will stand the test of time.
Absolutely.
From the comment that they've all actually been remade at some point, and they are also the ones that the general public, people who, because popular culture is something that all people know. That's why it's pop culture. I think a lot of people, they're so deeply in pop culture that the average person, not a movie fan, not even a horror fan, would still recognize them. It is something that touches everyone. It touches the horror fan. It touches the casual fan. It touches the novice. The genesis of what a lot of what people know about horror movies emanates from those 5 guys. So thank you guys for being a part of this, and we'll see you next time.
Later.
It's just like,
which one are you?
There we go. I'm poking in the eye. Kind of. Michael. Don't go to Haddonfield, Michael. I got you, bro. Come on.
I tried to throw you off.
Come on. I got you. Come on. What else you got?